Sforzata.
So it doesn't go away.
We were talking about the brain and cognition.
That's an area which I've got a great specialisation in, and would anybody ever would care for how they think if that's interesting to them, which for most they might not think that they need to learn how to think, you see. So most people you meet are not critical of their own thinking, but it is interesting that leaders, where good leadership is, one is critical of their own thinking, and you can hear that someone has critiqued their own thinking. Yeah. You could say that my expertise is really more not describing so many other things, in fact, but my expertise more is really about behaviour, that's all. So people could have specialisation in other things, of course, you know, and my specialisation really is in behaviour. And if you are thinking about this just mildly, might it be that you know that if you're outcome orientated, you're going to be far better off, and if you've got good skills in building rapport, you're going to be able to build a team. If you have aptitude in building a team and family skill dynamic, and you're supportive of people that's on a team, you've got habits and ways of your aptitude which is obvious to other women or men, and women are critical of their sisters and men are critical of their brothers. And you see, that's very important, because who has social interactiveness on a scale of such really comes to be developed. Over time you come to be more developed because you realise all the resistedness of something that needs to be, for something to be complete. And you're coming from a position more behind everyone, which you bring in front of you. That's the position. That's one position. The second position is that who is ever there, you always get below them because they have to be cared to be elevated. And only it is that the alpha who has omega, she or he has a behaviour of the most incredible leader on the earth.
The alpha and the omega.
Yes. Okay. Because it's the omega function. If you are an ontologist and you study culture and people and behaviours that come about as a result of this, then you'll see that if you have unity consciousness in your own being and you pace this to be, you're presupposing things that relate to this. If you come from frozen neurology in yourself, all that ever can be associated is frozen neurology, because that's state-specific of frozen neurology. So a beast was always be put on chicken legs when you talk to children, for instance, because they laughed hard when they heard about the beast. They thought that was as funny as hell. So this is very important, because if you're in Russia or you're in anywhere, you have a story of the Bhagwan or the the Bhagaga.
Baba Yaga.
Oh, now the Bhagavad Yaga, see? So everybody has this story of the Bhagavad Yaga. And the Bhagavad Yaga, really, if you tell it right, it's very good, because it teaches you that something very fictional could be very beast-like, but in fact it has chicken legs. So the story would be built a bit, and you'd see feathers coming off something that was very not caring about life much, and was very cannibalistic. And but it would be looked down past that, and you would see that it was on chicken legs. And the kids thought that was funny as hell.
How could you take it seriously then?
They could realise to hear something soft wouldn't bully them to feel what would be right and wrong, and give them a path of things, just of course natural, which is obvious, you know. But if it's in your ways that you're this way, but others aren't, you know, then some circumstance exists, isn't it, to help teach people how to be in a condition where you've got people who maybe don't respect life at all. So leadership, anyone would say, come back full circle, and what you do in your own thinking and what partnering aptitude that you have where you are to achieve anything in your own self. You might have not any thought about it, nor any training, and this is what I've done mostly, is be involved more in anyone's personal development. And it's people who really would spend money for their own personal development. The average person hasn't spent a cracker ever on their personal development. But 10% of people is the people that you do talk to, not the 90, because the 90 are not going to be, they'll just be following the 10% that are actually doing the right thing, because everybody else likes to flock. So someone really does have good discernment if they can see who could sit down to do something and they have great ability to do this and focus, or their mind is on the phone somewhere else.
Internally driven.
All the time, non-stop. So your own brain can come because you could hear some things, which is mindfulness. Mindfulness is your having ever said something for the sake of itself and not for the sake of other things, which that's called overlaying, yes? So when you're in your brain only can do one thing at a time. It can't be doing two things, which is opposite itself, or both are needing to apply the same neurology, which can't be, because one can only happen before something else. But if they're not congruent as thoughts, which generally they're not, one will be influencing the other. So when you could reverse back the person's speech, you'll hear things which fit perfectly to a message which is actually being spoken to you. So it sounds like it's nice, like they'll say, God save you, but what they've just said is, dogs. It's about your being dogs when you play it backward. But it is true that if you have to be saved, obviously it must be because you're only being treated as dogs. So when you play that backwards, God save us, you're going to hear something said backward to you, but in every single word or anything that anybody ever said, something is going on below consciousness, which is exact and can be computerized to be determined exact what the motivation is behind anyone. Because every single thing that somebody says or does has some internal process behind it, and that's my expertise. Areas of your brain or anyone else's that's involved in your speech involves kinesthetic motor movement, patterning and sequencing, and your left hemisphere is involved in the production of that, and your right hemisphere is very much involved in the production of everything that was energy and motion that relates to this. So these two parts of your brain function perfect because parts of what you say have to be put for the unconscious mind, and the other parts are put for the conscious mind to marshal and sequester information. So you're aware more that you're communicating to people more by connecting with what's implicit and implied. Very good, because what's that? It means you're just only glossing over the very things which should be, what's that? Intuitive. Because nobody needs to go over what's common sense, and that something is being unspoken, which is about that common sense, but it could be awry because you might not have examined that you don't get any benefit yourself from that behaviour you have, and we as a society don't either. And this is the danger most of all, is the underestimation of the amount of ignorant people actually existing in a room. Certainly you can have prize winners of peace, and they can be in the same room. You can see them, they spent a lot of money and dropped the country down. That's someone who could be in the room. You could have another person who really was involved in engineering, and they've made a lot of canals and things. And then you've got, a butcher and an accountant, and then you've got sort of a dressmaker and other people who help with gardens and things. And everybody's there, and you would see that everyone is acted and functioned the same. But you and I, we all expect and think that the world must not be other than sophisticated. And we imagine that because these clothes these people wear, because of how they speak, because of some other condition, whatever it is, but we don't examine the presuppositions of any of it, and we only just trundle along thinking that the world must be fine, because obviously there isn't as many stupid people as actually you should imagine does exist. And if you do, then you'll note the danger you're in. Because if a study's done just like a study which looks at why, like the Milgram study does, of what it is behind someone who could just put others to death, and then straight away they find that 68% or something of people would have taken someone to their death if providing that someone whose authority was there. That's all was needed. And some people wouldn't do anything about the experiment whatsoever, even right at the outset, because they just felt didn't seem to be anything worthwhile to themselves, and even the money they asked them to have wasn't even anything these people cared for. So those out of all the people that were left that did the study were people that would volunteer to be involved in a study, which was to do with learning, simple it was, but they come to engage, involved, and teach you from authority that punishment and rewards of punishment can be used, and we're just learning about what this is. And so that's what the experiment is about. And the person they're experimenting on is you, who will press the lever. And everyone else is an actor in the script.
To harm your fellow man.
And they have to be so good at what they do, basic, just normal, because not overdone, because it's got to be just like it would be, yeah? So actors do that, and it really is, they've scripted quite well. And then the experimented person comes in, and they're not to know that they are being experimented on whatsoever. They're just the ones that have to administer a little bit of shock and things, you know. If somebody gets something wrong is a question. And an actor is behind the screen and is scripted to certainly get some things wrong and some things right, and scream as well. But anyway, you can look into that. We won't talk too much about it, but it's only this that you should know that you're not in a safe zone per se, where all conditions is that what's real, which is. So is was somewhere in what was in King Jubb's time and the Jubbians, and you would say it with a ha, like ja, ha, not oo. It's got a U there, and so if you remove it from people's language, all of a sudden they don't have the capacity to hear things proper. And so words like D-O and D-U-E and D-E-W, which each means something totally different, can't be heard because you've just sounded every one of those with the same inflection. So you've lost a lot of inflection, haven't you? And you've lost a lot of your phonetic capacity to hear things and stuff. And what it would be if you were blind maybe before you were born more than you should be, and it should be that you could see 18 inches in front of you to get your present faces. But if you had, you would put down and to sleep, and you were mouth breathing and you got congested because of it, and you had parents, they never knew anything about children, and it's honest that they didn't, and they weren't even told anything either, and everything they did was not to know too much, and they gave you food stuff which really had the molecule of death in it. And so pending doom would have existed all person's life that was done that way. Some people were smacked to breathe, and so they have to be jump-started. Most people don't know even about natural birth, so we've got a bit of a mess. But this, which we're talking about the brain, you're talking about leadership. You're talking about the very things that also fall into your own self-initiativeness and things. You've got structures in your brain which engage your frontal cortex, which is involved your faculty to inspire creative influence of the future. And this engages the septal region of your brain, which is involved in your pleasure and your interest, wherever you are with some subject, and this causes you to have whole brain patterning because it engages you to be in the frontal cortex. Now, if you don't have emotion of pleasure or interest, you're going to be engaging more a componentry of your brain, which involves more amygdala function, and it's short-circuiting most of everything, and it's neurologically inhibiting the frontal cortex because these two switches don't work together. One switches the other off while it's functioning. In our behaviour, Can you laugh but feel really pissed at the same time? No. You cannot. And so, whilst one is functioning, the other is neurologically inhibited, and it's just a fact that your nerves are set up to be avoided of things which is painful, and so in a bank it's -5 for any act as such, and anything that's positive, as much as try as hard as you can to get it more than 1, it's only 1. So they can add up, but they have to be added up because they don't equal anything that anybody said or doing in their brain that's a -5 in their bank account. So you just only have to note that, well, emotion is stored in a certain way, and energy and motion that's stored that's positive is +1.
Okay.
As each one state could be chained together, you could add that up because you learned how to do an induction to build a state that was equivalent to +5, but you'd have to have at least +5 or +6 to minus a -5. So unless you know how to actually do an ionophoric conditioning where you are to be equivalent to the amount of ions that was spent where anything was, and you reverse that, many times over you are just only taking something where anything was adverse to the end of it. You start there. You say, start now at the ending where the end of the sequence is. Thank you so much, good. And if you got the end, the person says, yes, I got the end. So right, okay. Now run it backward because we're going to finish where you started. Do you know what I mean? So you're going to be going backward. Sorry, we're going to just do this, but let's just take a short moment. And so somebody runs the film backward, and now what they've done is to reverse things to be back where they were, where they began. And what was that? Out of the rabbit hole. Is that what your brain does as it comes back out of the rabbit hole? Yes, it is. So, but what if it didn't do it? Could you just sit with someone and you did that so that their warts were gone the next day? Yes. Could you do this so that somebody's leg was straightened in 4 days after it was broken? Yes. Could you assist someone who really would be very drastic and they actually need special forces because if they don't, they're going to bleed to death or something? Yes. But you have to know about induction, and this involves the brain and whole brain functioning. Whole brain functioning is whole, meaning psychological and physiological capacities that's involved in your leadership and your style of things. Brain, of course, involving leadership, aptitude, like what we're talking about, which needs you to be flexible, be in a flexible state, and be in uptime. So you have a gamma wave. A gamma wave happens from you because why? Well, because you've got a very flat wave, which is coming in as an epsilon, and it only comes in once every 11 seconds, which is equivalent to the heartbeat of the sun, and that which sets up some conditioning of your own brain, which repolarizes and pumps up the energy of it, and it takes only a second to do that, but then it continues on. It's sort of really like charging up everything and it continues on. But it happens every 11 seconds, but if you're not in a mode, which most people are not, so epsilon waves cannot be registered in most people, all right? Just the same as pheromone. 10% of people that you know have pheromone. Very few people today have any epsilon wave. Children have epsilon wave, and people who have genius also have epsilon wave. Now, most people who actually really are good leaders, they do possess some epsilon wave because it's general that they have really great mastery over something, and they know that most people really could have better mastery over something, like where you've come from. Do you know? And do you know that criminals redact information? And do you know that truth-telling has a structure, and you can tell straight away if something is actually patterning that's more whole brain patterning, or versus it's, hey man, it's frozen stuff. It's coming from frozen, it is frozen. So you're going to get better than that? Well, no. You might quiet that down and learn how to do something that actually causes rapport with people. So you learn how to build rapport with people, because this is a great skill, and any good leader is truly caring to build rapport with people. And so in an exceptional brain function, to have this capacity, 3 areas of your brain aren't being applied as they would be in a normal brain, and those are areas of your brain which is involving comparison. The 3 areas of your brain where if you're a child, these areas of your brain are perfect and only function in compatibleness. And so that's very important. Why? Well, because you're really learning, and you've got to learn, and when you're a child, these areas of your brain are working, functioning for you. But now what happens? You go to school, suddenly your brain's changed. What's occurred? Well, everything that was taught you was to narrow down, and you went wah wah. You went wah 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 wah. And so, that's a tutu. You've been tutu. Yeah, right. There are melodies, and each of these melodies do describe a shape, and you can hear in someone's heartbeat and hear their language, and you can hear the shape of their PQRST complex, which is coming from their heart, because your heart's your most magnetic organ, and it sets everything, and you need to have natural atriatic factor. That's so important, matter of fact, and that's only produced by the upper atrium of your right atrium of your heart, and every single cell of your body requires that. Now, if you do not have your heart-brain connection, your cells aren't receiving substance which helps connect it to the heartbeat and regulate itself, and so it loses itself where in signal you're in.
It's made in the heart.
It causes things, yes, to not to be in tune with the heart as it should be, because natural atriatic factor, which is produced in the right atrium, upper right atrium, is absolutely essential for all cell function, just the same as N-acetyl-neurominic acid is as well. And if you eat animal product, you're bringing the molecule of death in. And so is your brain going to function after that? No, it doesn't. It causes you to have pending doom, because you have a short life, because you have cardiovascular dementia, and at a very early age, you're not able to too much get into your frontal cortex, nor are you having any capacity to have gamma wave activity, you see? So after that, is your brain going to function? No. Especially if you're into this 4-beat stuff. You have no knowledge of it, you subject everybody else to it, and guess what? Everybody's brainstem is emitting 4-beat, and guess what after that? Sorry, but you only have 8 overtones. Can you have whole brain painting when you only have 8 overtones? No. You must have 13, okay? You have to have 13. You can't function on 8. Now, you try to make a rose with 8 overtones, you can't do it. Sorry, not with math. You cannot make a rose with 8 overtones. Guess what? Do you know how many overtones you need to make a rose? 13. And now, if you make a rose, you can make everything else. Okay, good. You can make the patterns of a rose in your brain. Now, if you cannot make the pattern of a rose in your brain, but you can, yes, you can, how can you see it? Can you see it out in front of you? Yes, three-dimensionally. Good. Because now you've got hypnagogic visioning. You see, your brain is starting to function better. It's more functionally plastic. Most people, when they look at a stereogram, it's straight away interesting to them because they can tell what they're doing inside, stopping their capacity to be able to see the stereogram. Here's what they're doing. They're telling themselves instruction, and whilst they're telling themselves instruction, you're not going to be able to see the stereogram. They're looking at the screen when you told them to actually look into the space, but they're continuously looking at the screen, back to the space, looking at the screen, and everything's interrupted when they're doing something which is opposite. And so they're learning about all the things that are going on in their brain as they're doing something to actually get their brain to be functionally plastic to be able to see a stereogram. So, you've got a neural efficiency quotient. Everyone does. Yes? And it's just the brain nerve that needs to be for that, not anything else. And most people, when they're learning to golf, they've got a massive amount of muscles and all sorts of movements, which is not necessary. Somebody comes down and they become excellent at what they do, and you become more exceptional brain function. To be super conscious, you've become more aware of the vestibular sense and the spatial orientation of control and direction and turning, and your understanding how to use the meta modality over speech and thought and behaviour, which is the integrative element of your behaviour. So these things not properly taught where artificial intelligence is at the moment, you see, only got bits of this, but not all of it. So at the moment, they could come and get these other pieces, so it could work better for them, but hopefully it might work for us. You see, if it works for us, you're getting aware and fully of what proper whole brain patterning is. Now you can pick up where frozen logos is. Where frozen logos is, you'll always hear a don't, won't, can't, should, try, but, must coming out of your mouth, and every single thing that it comes from is adverse. It comes from your functioning from adversity. Yes?
Well, pending doom is the baseline of our culture, it seems.
Or anything is called Tavistock, post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's from all wars and only equalising some debt from it, but not just that, and the fact that some psychological existed, which shouldn't be, that the stress of your own beingness is your subject to something which is no asset whatsoever at the end of it. So there is a wrong reasonness behind the idea that psychological operation would be obvious. Of course, that's a brain freeze. So is that anything came from we the people? Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Well, it's
Yeah. So the brain involving wholeness, psychological, physiological, brain,
frontal cortex.
involving leadership and directedness in your own self, and the body we share as well as yours, the one you're listening through, and then this functioning relates to everything which would be sustainable for you or for us for several generations of your own self into a future, and then everything you do and what is it about, but the support of the children where you are, and children come to be first. And then it's said such, it's children, parent, and heaven. And so I'm so sorry to tell those who might be a bit upset about it, but children are first, and then parenting. So when you put things in terms of the child, that's very important. But if you don't, you're putting terms in what your parent right is, or something. But the child has a right to a parent. And the child can only have rights that you have rights. And you can only have rights that you uphold. And if you're only taken to a court of a black frock, white wig one, who's only going to cause a presupposition to exist and no fact is ever going to be tried, nothing can be heard because it's dead. It's a fiction. What's going on is something which has no central organised nervous system. It's going to join you and make you also a fiction, so that you can't speak either. And if you do, you're in a situation where you're only speaking to a fiction, so how can you
It's
do
a
anything
mass
with that?
hypnosis of cognitive dissonance. It's
Where
a
you
mass
join
hypnosis.
somebody who has a central organised nervous system with somebody else who has a central organised nervous system, you've learned how to join like with like. But what would happen if as a child you never learned how to join like with like? Would you say that you were equivalent to some entity in your head? I think it would be very reducing of things if you did. If you said you couldn't get things from your own learning and you had to just channel it from somewhere else, that could be, but I'll tell you what, it's a bit limiting, isn't it? But what if you're channeling excellence because you've got that, because you've done the work for that? Would it be what you're saying when you channel something, is it because of all the time you put in, 51,000 hours that relate to maybe a topic, one specific topic? So somebody comes to be more expert in the world, or somebody really just says they're an expert, but they really didn't put anything into it to achieve it.
It took me 40 years to become an overnight sensation.
It can only take a second for that. And the things which is, as you point out, being king of an anthill for a day is what is interesting to people. It's a possibility. But what a possibility of not just being king of an anthill for a day, but really thinking of something that's eternal and forever, and the things which is more enduring and endearing. So if you died, you'd come back and you would realise that everything you talked or thought about, which was your body thing, and everything was with the lecherousness of all beingness between desire and fear, you'd see that something was way beyond these two banks that would hold your interest and would have changed your mind. And so it is about you having changed your mind, that's all. If you stay in whole brain patterning and you encourage others to be, you're going to be causing the world around yourself to be more championing of yourself and championing of the world. And certainly if somebody has more information than you do, wouldn't you be giving this person some credit and beingness of themselves? You certainly would want to hear things, because it would mean if you did, 50% of yourself is balanced. you've got an external reference in the things you do. But what would happen if you're bred not to have an external reference? Yes.
Shocking.
What if you only have an internal reference for everything as your referential index? It's not going to be good. It's going to be dangerous, matter of fact. When somebody says fire, you're going to look around the corner and you could get burned. So, because you don't have an external reference, 50% of yourself can't be told what to do, and the average person, it's extremely difficult for them to be said anything to whatsoever. They'll polarize it, knee-jerk as fast, and they're only observing themselves in a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah? And they're in a defensive mode non-stop, and they're never not. So this has got nothing to do with anyone being there. No one is there. Someone is there, and they're not in there for themselves. So when somebody is in there for himself, don't tell me they're in there for others. Of course they are. How? Because everybody asks you to be in there for yourself, and when you're not, that's a problem to everyone else. So if you're fit, you'll look after yourself, and then you could be fit to someone, and then it's true, a good leader, she or he, listening, of course, is someone who's the servant's servant. And it's not anything else, so don't ever think it is. Unless it's possible for you to come from within all of us as we the people, nobody much is going to listen.
Yes, the servant
All right?
is the master.
Thank you.